Hello and welcome to Castine Bookworms, featuring Luca Montanero, Mason Reed, Aurora Simmons, Reese Agnew, and Regan Skillings. We are a bunch of kids who like books and want to talk about them. Today we are going to interview award-winning graphic novelist Victoria Jamieson about her books and writing. Her most recent works include When Stars Are Scattered and Roller Girl. She won the Newbery Honor Award in 2016 for Roller Girl. This award is given to authors who have written distinguished children's books each year. She was a finalist for the National Book Award for Young People's Literature in 2020 for When Stars Are Scattered. The National Book Award is given for books of the highest quality written by Americans and published by American publishers. She's also won numerous publishing and state book awards. Welcome, Victoria, and thank you for agreeing to let us ask you some questions. How are you doing, and what do you think of Castine?
Oh, well, thanks for having me. Thanks for having me on your podcast. I love listening to podcasts. I'm really happy you have one about books. So I didn't get to see much of Castine because I just came in this morning. I saw the beautiful ocean and your beautiful school, but I gotta explore a little bit more after school's over.
Yeah. All right, first question is, how long have you been writing, and how did you start it first?
Well, I think if you're a kid and if you're writing, every kid likes to write, so I was no different. I liked to write when I was in elementary school. I would write stories, I would draw pictures. I remember writing my first book when I was in third grade called Super Cow. And it was just a classroom assignment where everyone in class had to write a book, and we folded paper up and stapled it and made our books, and mine was about a cow going to see Superman.
Yeah.
All right. Did you always want to be a writer?
I didn't always want to be a writer. I think largely because I didn't know it was a career option. I read lots of books, obviously, but I never thought that it was a job that someone actually did. I never got to meet an author when I was a kid. We never had one come to my school. So I didn't know it was a job. I just liked to write and I liked to draw, so I just kind of kept doing it.
So how did you decide to write graphic novels as opposed to just straight up novels?
I think I made graphic novels because I don't think I actually know how to write a chapter book without pictures, because I love pictures so much and I'm a very visual person that half the time I think in pictures and it would be hard for me to take that and turn it into words instead. Graphic novels just feels like a much more natural way for me to tell stories. And I love all the things you can do when you put words and pictures together. You can do so many fun things. Like, for example, I like to have the pictures say one thing, like maybe a character is looking worried, but then they're saying something else, like, I'm fine. So I like when you have the words and pictures and maybe they don't match up or maybe they say slightly different things. I think it makes graphic novels really exciting and fun.
Yeah, I agree.
What do you think the most fun part of writing is?
Ooh, the most fun part of writing. The most fun part of writing for me is the drawing. The writing is still kind of a struggle for me. I always struggle, especially when I'm starting a new project. It's hard for me to come up with all the new characters, all the new settings, the whole storylines. That part's hard. And if you're a writer yourself, then you know that sometimes you struggle with writer's block or figuring out what's going to happen with a story. So my favorite part of writing is once I've got the basics figured out. When I get to a certain point, it's like I'm watching a movie play in my head, and I just get to write what I see happening in the movie. So when I get into that kind of flow, that's the most fun part of writing.
Yes.
So in our last question, you said that writing was difficult, but overall, is it the most difficult part of your writing process?
I would say yes, especially, like I said, that beginning brainstorming, which I think is kind of writing and drawing together, just trying to figure out the characters, trying to figure out everything, because you're kind of making something from nothing, just from your imagination.
Yeah.
And in graphic novels, I need to know everything about my character, because I need to draw, for example, their bedroom. So I need to know what kind of posters do they have on their walls, what does their bedspread look like, what do their rugs look like. All these details I need to know as if they're my best friends. So it just takes some time to get to know my new characters.
And do you deal with this a lot when you are writing books, or is it just like sometimes you already have the clear image in your head?
I think every time it's a bit of a struggle. For example, for my first graphic novel, Roller Girl, I knew what I wanted it to be about. I knew I wanted it to be a kid playing roller derby. But I still had to know who this character was and decide all those things. Does she live in a house or an apartment? Who's her family? Does she have any siblings? Does she have a pet? All these things I need to figure out, even if I have a pretty clear idea of what the story is going to be.
Okay.
What advice would you give to kids or young writers who want to start out writing and become authors?
I would say pay attention to what you like to read. I guess number one is read. Read a lot. That's number one for my job as an author. I read all the time to get inspiration. And if you want to be a writer, like pay attention to what you like to read. If you love reading fantasy books, maybe you should try writing a fantasy story. Or if you love reading science fiction, write science fiction. Or if you love nonfiction or historical fiction, there's so many ways to be a writer. So the kind of stories you love to read might be a good clue about what you like to write.
Yeah.
Where do you get your ideas for your books?
So most of the ideas for my books come from my own life and my own experiences, for the most part. For example, Roller Girl I wrote because I played roller derby, and I love roller derby. All's Fair in middle school was about the Renaissance Fair because I love Renaissance festivals. My latest book, and Omar Mohammed, my co-author, will be joining us at your school this afternoon virtually. But that one was different because it wasn't my experiences, it was Omar's experiences. So I usually try and base my stories in real life somehow.
Out of all the books you've written, do you have a favorite, and if so, why?
That's a tough question, because graphic novels especially take a really long time to make. It takes about 2 years for each book, so I have to love each book. But I usually say Roller Girl is one, because it's my first graphic novel. It made me realize I love graphic novels. And the other one I'll say is When Stars Are Scattered, because I made a new friend in Omar. It was my first time writing with somebody else, and I get to volunteer with his nonprofit, which is called Refugee Strong, and that's made such a positive impact on my life. I get to see kids sending in birthday money or lemonade sale money to support other students in refugee camps. So it's just been a really warm, nice part of my life.
What, to you, are the most important elements of good writing?
Ooh, the most important elements of good writing. That's a good question. So I write books for kids. I don't write books for grown-ups. So what I try and do, the first thing I try and do when I write a book is to forget what I know as a grown-up, if that makes sense, and try and remember exactly what it was like when I was a kid. Because when you grow up, you have different worries or think about different things like your car or taxes, like really boring things. And when I write for kids, I try and forget all the grown-up issues I have to deal with on a daily basis and remember what I was concerned about, like my friends, my teachers, my parents, and how mean they were to me. They weren't really that mean, but So yeah, I try and really think like a kid when I write kids' books.
Yeah. Have you ever been stuck when you were writing and you didn't have an idea of what to put in?
Yes, I have. Like I said, that beginning stage where I'm brainstorming, that's often where that happens, where my ideas are so vague in the beginning, and I have no idea where they're going. It's like I'm kind of reaching around in the dark, trying to figure out what the story is. So I get stuck sometimes. When that happens, sometimes I need to take a break, either for the afternoon and I go for a walk. I do something to change my scenery. Sometimes I need to take a longer break, like a month. But I think the key for me is whenever I get stuck, I never abandon a project completely. I've never just been I'm never going to touch that again. There are some projects I've set aside for a few years, but I always go back and look at them and see if it's time for me to do that now.
Were any of your books really hard to find an idea for?
Yeah. I think when I wrote All's Fair in middle school, it was right after Roller Girl, and I had a hard time deciding what to write next. And I actually started a book that I haven't finished. It was about, I guess you all know Nancy Drew. So I had started a book that was about Nancy Drew, but she's now retired and living in a retirement village in Florida. And she gets a teenage helper, and they solve crimes together. So I still really like that idea, but for some reason at the time it just wasn't working. So that was one where I started it, and I just couldn't finish it at the time. And then I had to work on another idea.
Yeah.
What are you working on now?
Well, my next book is actually set in Maine. I just finished it, but it's set in Maine. It's based on a Disney movie. So I was sitting at my computer one day working, and I got an email from Disney, and they were like, "Hi, it's Disney. Do you want to make a book about one of our movies?" And I was like, "Okay." The movie they had in mind was The Parent Trap. And I said okay because I love The Parent Trap. I love it. So that's the next book. It's called Operation Parent Trap.
And what have you learned from your experience writing all these books?
Ooh. what have I learned from writing books? Every book teaches me something different. I think working with Omar really taught me the importance of asking questions and listening to the answers. I think as an author, I used to always just think about the story I was telling. But working with Omar taught me a really important lesson that you need to be curious about the world around you and ask people questions. Ask them about their lives, what their favorite food is. That curiosity, I think, keeps you going as a writer. So, yeah, every book teaches me something new.
Could you give us another example from another book?
Well, so Roller Girl, that was an example that it was just a special book to write because I was playing roller derby and I wanted to write a book about it. So I got more involved in the community. Like I started coaching the junior team. I started interviewing some players. So kind of similar to what I said with Omar, but it's a book that I was writing, so I needed to get personally involved. I think if you want to be a writer, you can't really be separated, at least, okay, for me as a writer, I can't be separated from the world. I would love to stay in my room and not talk to anybody all the time. I'm a very quiet, like kind of shy person, but I find that I get a lot of my inspiration by making myself uncomfortable and going into the world, meeting new people, trying new things, even if it's not a fun thing to try or if it's kind of uncomfortable for me.
Yeah.
Putting myself in those situations helps me write my books.
Yeah, great. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Castine Bookworms. Tune back in 2 weeks and catch us again.